I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Go ahead. My name is Sean Flowerday. I am the chair of the Lancaster County Commission. On my left is Commissioner Rick Vest and Vice Chair, and on my right is Commissioner Krista Yoakum. Commissioner Deb Shore will be here momentarily. She is driving back from an open house at our Youth Services Center that was doing an open house. She was representing Lancaster County there. Commissioner Amundsen will not be with us today. She is down with the flu that has taken down half our city. So, moving forward. Mr. Clerk, would you please kick things off?
A copy of the Nebraska Open Meetings Act is located on the wall at the rear of the hearing room. Additionally, a copy of all written material to be discussed at today's open meeting is available from the county clerk staff at the front of the hearing room. The material can also be viewed on the county's website at lancaster.ener-d.gov. Agenda item 1 are minutes. Approve the minutes of the Board of Commissioners meeting held on Tuesday, January 28th, 2020.
I move approval of those minutes.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Please call the roll.
Yoakum,
Yes.
Vest,
Yes.
Flowerday.
Yes.
Motion carries 3-0. Number 2 are claims. Approval of all claims processed through February 4th, 2020.
I move approval of the claims.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Please call the roll.
Vest,
Yes.
Yoakum,
Yes.
Flowerday.
Yes.
Motion carries 3-0. Next is number 3, a special presentation. This is proclaiming February 11th as 4-H Achievement Day. Karen Wobig, Extension Educator Unit Leader.
Good morning. Good to be here today. Well, kind of annually, we come before you to proclaim 4-H, or to request that you proclaim a day set aside for 4-H achievement celebration. And so next Tuesday, February 11th, we actually hold our achievement celebration, and it's a pretty fun event for the families to get their awards and to get recognized for multiple things. And so we are here to ask if you will proclaim February 11th as the 4-H Achievement Day. With me are a couple of folks, Tracy Anderson, who is the 4-H educator and in charge of this lovely 4-H program that we have, and then Vicki. Where is she? She sneaks around. I usually forget to introduce her, but Vicki Jedlicka, our media specialist, who wants to document everything we do, so that's why she's following us. But I'd like to ask Tracy to give you a few bits of information about 4-H today.
Good morning. I'll keep this kind of brief, but I just want to share just a little bit about some of the things that we are doing here in Lancaster County through 4-H. And one of the things I want to share is that last year the Lancaster County 4-H program engaged over 35,000 youth through 4-H programs, and almost 27,000 of those were through like school enrichment programs such as embryology, garbology, food nutrition. And since it is the time of the year, and since we did just complete our first session of embryology, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about that. So here's a fun fact. Essentially, every third grade classroom in Lancaster County participates in the 4-H embryology program. And that amounts to 192 classrooms, and 3,877 third graders get to participate in that. And so we bring a dozen fertilized eggs to every single classroom. We set them in the incubator and then present information about it. And then we return the next week, and we do candle each of the eggs, allowing everyone to see the progression of the egg. And then the chickens usually hatched, 21 days all told. So the youth get to learn so much from this hands-on positive youth development program. And we're just so thankful for all the support that you provide to Lancaster County 4-H and the youth that actually get to participate in those programs. It really helps them reach their full potential, and we're just so thankful for your support. So thank you so much. And if you are available next Tuesday evening and would like to come to our 4-H Achievement Celebration, you're very welcome. So anything else, Karen?
Oh, I think That's it, thanks again.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Mr. Clerk, can we move down to correlating item 5A?
Would you like me to read the proclamation?
Yeah, that's a
yes.
great idea. Please read the proclamation. That's way better. Do that. Thanks.
Whereas 4-H is America's largest youth development organization with nearly 6 million youth participants, and whereas 4-H empowers young people with life skills such as problem solving, responsibility, and citizenship while developing confidence, independence, resilience, and compassion. And whereas 4-H in Lancaster County engages over 35,000 youth through clubs, school enrichment, and after-school programs, and is supported by nearly 2,800 volunteers. And whereas 4-H provides experiences where youth learn by doing in areas such as science, citizenship, healthy living, agricultural literacy, and career development. And whereas 4-H is delivered by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln Extension in cooperation with Lancaster County. Now therefore, the Lancaster County Board of Commissioners does hereby proclaim February 11th, 2020 as 4-H Achievement Day, and encourages residents of our community to learn more about achievements of youth as part of the Lancaster County 4-H Youth Development Program. In witness thereof, we have hereunto signed on February 4th, 2020, and this is by the Board of Commissioners. And I will move on to new business 4A. This is a resolution proclaiming February 11th, 2020 as 4-H Achievement Day.
Move approval. And I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Please call the roll.
Yocum,
Yes.
Vest,
Yes.
Shore,
Yes.
Flowerday.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0. Next is number 4, consent items. These are routine business items that are expected to be adopted without dissent. Any individual item may be removed for special discussion and consideration by a commissioner or by any member of the public without prior notice. Unless there's an exception, these items will be approved as one with a single vote of the Board of Commissioners. These items are approval of amendments to the following contracts. Amendment to County Contract C-13-232 with Keefe Commissary Network, LLC, for inmate commissary services. Amendment to County Contract C-18-285 with Mahoney Sprinkler for the inspection, testing, and maintenance of fire sprinklers. Amendment to County Contract C-14-606 with Sarpy County to provide microfilming and scanning services. Right-of-way contracts with the following: Susan C. Boswell and Carroll U.S. Bank Farm Management Department, Southwest 56th Street and West Old Cheney Road, in the amount of $219. Alan G. and Janice Culver, North 1st Street and West Bluff Road, in the amount of $2,876. Received and placed on file the county engineer's quarterly report for October 1st through December 31st, 2019.
Move approval of the consent items.
And I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Please call the roll.
Shore,
Yes.
Yocum,
Yes.
Vest,
Yes.
Flowerday.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0. Next is number 5, new business.
5B is what we want.
We'll be on to 5B, which is ratification of refund of property tax for the years of 2017 and 2018, requested by Lauren Lindo on September 24, 2019, on behalf of John Otten Oil and Propane, Inc., in the total amount of $338.30 due to a clerical error pursuant to Nebraska Revised Statute 77-173-01.
I will move approval.
And I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Yocum,
Yes.
Vest,
Yes.
Shore,
Yes.
Flowerday.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0. C is a memorandum of understanding between the United States Marshal Service and Lancaster County on behalf of the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office to participate in the Violent Offender Task Force to investigate and apprehend local, state, and federal fugitives.
I would move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Please call the roll.
Shore,
Yes.
Yocum,
Yes.
Vest,
Yes.
Flowerday.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0. 5D is an agreement with Caliber Press to conduct conditional use of force training being hosted by Lancaster County Sheriff's Office on July 1st, 2020, The cost of the county is $6,500.
I move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Please call the roll.
Vest,
Yes.
Shore,
Yes.
Yocum,
Yes.
Flowerday.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0. E is a memorandum of understanding between the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Homeland Security Investigations, Kansas City, Lancaster County on behalf of the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office, and the City of Lincoln on behalf of the Lincoln Police Department to participate in a criminal interdiction task force. The memorandum of understanding will become effective for 1 year upon execution by special agent and change.
I move approval.
I will second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Please call the roll.
Yocum,
Yes.
Vest,
Yes.
Shore,
Yes.
Flowerday.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0. 5F is utility permit number 1930, allowing Lincoln wastewater system to install a water main within the northerly right-of-way of Old Cheney Road from Highway 77 west of South Folsom Street and east to the railroad. There is no cost to the county.
Pam Dingman, Lancaster County Engineer. Last week, we had the permit to install Lincoln Utilities on Old Cheney between 77 east to 14th Street, which does require a closure for a lengthy period of time of Old Cheney. This permit does not have a closure. It is still major construction along the right-of-way of Old Cheney west of Highway 77.
Thanks.
I will move approval.
And I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Yocum,
Yes.
Vest,
Yes.
Shore,
Yes.
Flowerday.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0. G is a recommendation from the purchasing agent and the county engineer to award and execute a purchase order to Murphy Tractor using Sourcewell Contract 032515-JDC for the purchase of 2 compact tractor mulching heads for a total cost of $60,608.
Good morning, Ron Bohati with Lancaster County Engineering. I just want to point out a couple things about this purchase and then answer any questions if you have it. We've been utilizing these last 2 forestry heads that we purchased last year continuously. And what we found is instead of having a crew of 6 people out flagging the road, actually cutting the branches off, dragging them up the hill, putting them in the chipper, we can just put this mulch head on the front of a compact track loader. A lot of times we can just have one person out there. We can do it year round. We don't have to have someone out there when it's freezing temperatures. They'll be inside the track loader. It has a heater, and our productivity has actually gone up with it. So we'd like to purchase 2 more so that we can have 1 in each district. And it was a budgeted item.
And Pam Ding, Lancaster County Engineer, I would like to add that this is more of our continuing effort to be more environmentally friendly as county engineering. When I started 6 years ago, we still burned in the right-of-way, which is not good for a number of reasons. Mulching this allows us to leave the mulch in place. It's much better for the environment to just let this stuff decompose in the right-of-way. It does, if we do it on the surface of snow, sometimes we get complaints, it does look a little messy on the white surface of the snow, but I will assure you that still melts on through and decomposes in place, which is, again, really a better environmental solution.
I will move approval.
And I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Shore,
Yes.
Yocum,
Yes.
Vest,
Yes.
Flowerday.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0. H is a recommendation from the purchasing agent to enter into a special purchase according to County Purchasing Act for a demo model of slightly used crawler loader.
Good morning, Bob Waller, purchasing agent. So this is being brought to you today as a special purchase request according to the County Purchasing Act. What brings it into this category are 2 things. One is the fact that it has 320 hours, so it is slightly used. But also there's 2 other things. One, it is available right away, which is important for the county engineer, especially coming into the spring with the work that they might have if we get flooding again. but also the fact that this one provides the same warranty as a new unit with the discount of a new unit, even though it is slightly used. So by putting it into this manner, it allows us to go out for 5 days through the e-bid system for an informal quote process. And then if no one responds to it or we get any other quotes that don't match, then we still come back to you for approval of the actual purchase.
Yeah, appreciate you coming and explaining that, Bob. It sounds like this is just a little bit outside the norm. And
It
you've
is.
you've done a nice job of clarifying what's going on and why this is a good move for the county to proceed. So I appreciate that. I would move approval of this.
I'll second.
Just one question. Can you tell us how a crawler loader is used?
Sure. Ron Bohati, Lancaster County Engineering. As opposed to a wheel loader, a crawler loader just has like tank tracks on it, so they're more stable. They can go in some of the environments and the slopes on the side of the road that a wheel loader can't. So we use this equipment to do dirt work. We also use it to push up the rock and sand and gravel. And I just wanted to add that this does take off some of the equipment that we have on our old inventory list from the 60s, some of the very old dozers that we can no longer get parts for. Those are shown as a trade-in with their asset numbers on this requisition.
Okay. Great.
Okay. Any further discussion? I would entertain a motion. Do we have one?
We do.
Well, that just shows how much I'm doing. We have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Vest,
Yes.
Shore,
Yes.
Yocum. Flowerday.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0. 5I and J will hold until after the public hearings. Next is number 6, public comment. Those wishing to speak on items relating to county business not on agenda may do so at this time.
Are there any members of the public here to speak on public comment in regards to items not on the agenda? Obviously, we will have public comment for the public hearings, so.
Next is number 7, announcements. The Lancaster County Board of Commissioners will hold a mid-year budget meeting on Thursday, February 6, 2020 at 8:30 a.m. in the Bill Luxford Studio of the County City Building. The Lancaster County Board of Commissioners will hold its next regular meeting on Tuesday, February 11, 2020 at 9 a.m. in Room 112 of the County City Building. County Commissioners can be reached at 402-441-7447 or commish@lancaster.ne.gov. The Lancaster County Board of Commissioners meeting is broadcast live on Link TV City. For the rebroadcast schedule, visit lincoln.ne.gov. Meetings are also streamed live on Link TV and can be viewed on YouTube. Number 8 is public hearings.
Sorry, Mr. Clerk.
Go ahead.
I should have given you a heads up here. Before we move on to the public hearings, is there anyone here to speak in public comment for the Board of Equalization? If so, we'll recess our current meeting, go to the Board of Equalization, do that quickly to allow people to have their moment so that they don't have to wait through the public hearing. Is there anyone here? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so Mr. Clerk, please carry on with the public hearings. Sorry about that.
First public hearing is street name change 19002, renaming a portion of Nebraska Highway 2 to Nebraska Parkway between Calvert Street and South 120th Street, Lincoln, Lancaster County, Nebraska, generally located at the existing Nebraska Highway 2 within the city limits of Lincoln and the unincorporated area of Lancaster County, and naming a proposed future connection as Jamaica Avenue from the South Beltway to South 27th Street. Both street name changes become effective upon the opening of the South Beltway. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do. Steve Hendrickson with the Lincoln Lancaster County Planning Department. This is an item that comes to us initially from the Nebraska Department of Transportation. They are working on the South Beltway and the signage for it. They wanted to order and design all of their signs, so they wanted to know how long the street name would be for the previous Nebraska Highway 2. Highway 2 will be actually moved onto the South Beltway, so that name will be removed from approximately about 120th or so in toward the city, so we needed a name for the future. The name will not be changing until the South Beltway becomes the new Highway 2, so we're several years out. We notified about a dozen property owners or so who actually use Highway 2 as their address. Of the proposed name, Nebraska Parkway. We used Nebraska Parkway after discussing it with several different agencies. Like we have a Capitol Parkway, we have an Antelope Valley Parkway in town, reflects some of the green space that we have along this route. So it was recommended to you from our street name committee. And then we also have a smaller connection down by Saltillo Road, which will be a brand new road that will connect up first with Saltillo Road and eventually over to 27th Street, but it connects at about 33rd Street, so it didn't make any sense to name it 27th Street when you get off it, you're about at 33rd Street. So it was proposed for the name Jamaica Avenue. The town of Jamaica was right there at Saltillo. Jamaica Trail is the name of the trail, and so that name is recommended for you as well. That street may actually be, part of it will be built with the South Beltway. And here to answer any questions you might have. Okay, thank you.
Okay, is there anyone here to testify in favor of the Nebraska Parkway street name change? Anyone here to testify in opposition? Anyone here to testify in a neutral capacity? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and move on to the correlating item.
This is 5I, a resolution in a matter of the street name change number 19002 to rename a portion of Nebraska Highway 2 as Nebraska Parkway between Calvert Street and South 120th Street, and to name the proposed future connection from the South Beltway to South 27th Street as Jamaica Avenue.
Move approval.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? I did think that Busalis Parkway had a nice ring to it, but it was it was going to be I think too confusing for the business owners and people who already used Nebraska Highway as their address. So, yep, we'll go ahead and move on then. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Yocum,
Yes.
Vest,
Yes.
Shore,
Yes.
Flowerday.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0.
However, the Busalis Trail runs parallel right there.
I know.
That was
Would've
part of
been
my
very nice
that was
fit.
part of my argument. That was part of my argument. So, all righty. Moving on to the next public hearing.
Next is County Text Amendment number 19010, related to animal feeding operations, also known as commercial feedlots, amend Article 2 definitions, Article 4 AG District, Article 13 Special Permits, and Article 22 General Provisions of the Lancaster County zoning regulations relating to commercial feedlots.
Steve Hendrickson with the Lincoln Lancaster.
I'm going to go ahead and swear you in again.
Sure.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do. This text amendment, I think, is very well known to you and probably members of the audience. We've done several briefings on this in the past, so I won't go into great detail. It is the result of a working group that we came from the county board of 10 members, so we very much appreciate all the work that they did. Met for 11 times over the summer, worked on a text amendment. That text amendment was then put in legal format by the county attorney's office, had a public hearing before the planning commission. It generally received a lot of support from the public. A few amendments were proposed, but overall the planning commission left it as proposed by the working group with the changes from the county attorney. And the planning commission recommended it to you unanimously 9-0. Here if you have any questions, or Jen as well.
Just one quick one to follow up. 10 members of the task force were working on this, and you say they met 11 times over the summer, Steve. So.
Correct. Yes, so they put an awful lot of hours of work, as well as we gave them homework assignments in advance, things to look at before the meetings. And there was one public meeting that was held as well for a chance for the public to come in and make some comments on an early draft.
So really a big thank you to those citizens
Absolutely.
who volunteered their time to be a part of this policy, and these are the findings that they came up with.
Yes, and they actually brought quite a bit of knowledge to the topic, far more knowledge than myself and Tom Chaka had. We also brought in some outside speakers that I think really greatly added to the information base as well.
This task force was a heavy lift, and I just want to thank everybody who was involved with it, staff and the citizens who participated. So, thank you. Okay, we'll start with in favor testimony. Anyone here to speak in favor of the county text amendment number 19010?
We have some people signed in to testify, and if they'll come up forward at a time and I'll administer oath. Edison McDonald, Jonathan Leo, Terry Lanigan, and John Hanson,
Do I need to sign in there too?
if you would.
And can I just get a quick show of hands? Who is intending to speak today in this public hearing? Can you just, if you are. Okay, that's relatively few. I will count then. We'll leave the time at 5 minutes per speaker, but it's appreciated.
Okay, if I could give you for the oath. Solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth and nothing but the truth?
Okay. Morning. I have presents for everybody.
Reading material.
I think that's enough. Got one more if we need another. Good morning. My name is Edison McDonald, Edison McDonald, representing GC Resolve and Nebraska Communities United. We want to thank the commission and the Planning Commission and all the members of the task force for their tremendous work on this. I think that the standards that have been proposed are a great first step. Today I come and am presenting a report assembled by a variety of community members, farmers, small business owners, and community leaders that have a greater vision for the next steps. And today we wanted to talk a little bit about some of those next steps. Many of the aspects of this report have been included, and the tools within there have been included in the recommendations that are in front of you today. This report is not only for Lancaster County, but also a good tool and guide for other counties as they're going through similar processes. Our suggestion is, number one, looking at no new large CAFOs until standards are set in place. Now you guys are setting standards in place. Creating an animal cap per operation. These caps should be developed in consideration of the standards set under NAC Title 130. Large CAFOs create the most significant issues. It makes sense to limit these types of operations. This also helps to protect the family nature of family farming. We'd like to see increased setbacks. While the setbacks are okay that are in your proposal, we'd like to see them increase to a minimal 3/4 mile and 1.5 miles from large CAFOs and 2.5 miles setbacks from public use areas, including schools, churches, communities, parks, recreation areas. That increased notice time is always a valuable tool in ensuring that we're able to have a better public dialogue, and that ultimately you're able to be a good neighbor by having those conversations with your neighbors ahead of time and allowing for the community process to work. Emission reporting, ensuring that we're tracking those emissions is key. Looking at ground and water testing on all sources within half a mile of the operation, and public reporting of those results should be a required element of the initial application for a special permit. Ultimately, although the DEQ does do some of that testing, having those aspects in front of you and in front of the community so that we can understand and we can testify on those is absolutely key for us to understand the aspects of our public safety. In particular in Lancaster County, where we have issues like lack of water in some areas, and in other areas we have tremendously high nitrate levels, as you'll see on the nitrate map included in this document. That becomes of extra importance. Ensuring a nutrient management plan, and I can't stress enough the importance of ensuring that we are considering cover cropping as a key tool in our planning process throughout the entire Planning Commission and ensuring that we're developing a better community. Not only is this going to help to develop better soil, this is going to help protect our waterways, and as a key issue for many Nebraskans right now, cover cropping can help to mitigate up to 50% of the impacts of flooding. As we look towards another wet spring, that's something that you should have on your mind. Ensuring we have that environmental impact review up front, again, is key.
1 minute remaining.
Looking at the importance of disaster funds and ensuring that we have decommissioning requirements. Throughout the southeast and the east, what we've seen is a continuous set of standards that have failed to take this into consideration and have allowed for a great many barns that have become ultimately blighted eyesores and have been put in the condition where they may devalue the farmland. Looking at a haul agreement and ensuring that there's a haul agreement, I know especially with the two projects presented in Lancaster County, that was a significant portion of the conversation. With that, thank you very much for your time, for your consideration. I hope that you'll look at supporting these standards, maybe with a little bit greater setback, and I hope that you'll look at these considerations as we move into the future. Thank you.
Next is Jonathan Leal.
Good morning, Honorable Commissioners. Nice to be with you again. I'm here in support. My name is Jonathan Leo, L-E-O, 2321 Devonshire Drive in Lincoln. I'm here to support these proposed amendments. I've been interested in and involved with the initial Lincoln Premium Poultry Barns application that was approved by both the Planning Commission and this board. And the concern that came out of both the Planning Commission hearings and this board, as you know, were that there were inadequate regulations to govern the permitting and review of permit applications for CAFOs in Lancaster County. This is a great, great moment to get to this point where we are now about to, I hope, actually codify a set of standards that sets a new floor for how CAFOs must be developed and permitted. I don't regard myself as greedy, but I have 4 proposed amendments to the existing amendments, 3 of which I regard as critical tweaks to the existing language, 1 of which is a new subject, but arguably the most critical of all that has not been addressed by these amendments. At Mr. Hendrickson's request after the Planning Commission hearing, I provided a set of these proposed amendments, which were introduced at the Planning Commission hearing, to the county attorney. I don't know, and I haven't checked with Ms. Holloway to determine whether or not those have been presented to you for your review. Have you seen these amendments before?
We've not seen any amendments with your, at least I haven't, with your name on it.
And have they not been presented to the? Okay. All right. Let me briefly.
I thought we had an email about it, but.
Excuse me?
Yes, they were sent to us. At least I'm sorry. I have them in my email. I thought they were sent to everybody. So.
If I may, let me. If you can look at section 1. Article 13, special permit, section 13.035. There's a requirement for a completed Lancaster County animal feeding operation siting assessment matrix, and there's an example of that matrix in the proposed amendments. My concern about the matrix is that it requires currently, and I'm quoting, any necessary documentation to verify the accuracy, unquote, of the choices made in that matrix. shall be included with the operation, with the application. What I would like to see is a requirement that, and here I'm quoting again, all documentation necessary to verify the accuracy of the choices made in that matrix be submitted. So as opposed to any necessary, all documentation necessary. My point is that the matrix and the task force considered this is inherently subjective. That's why they chose to require that there not be a score assigned to the siting matrix for Lancaster County because of its inherent subjectivity. For the same reason, without a requirement that every choice made about what this animal feeding operation will do or not do, how far away it is from homes, whether neighbors have been contacted, what the property value impacts may be, I'm suggesting that my changes are critical to make sure that every choice that is made on that matrix is documented with information to support the choice. Otherwise, there's no accountability.
1 minute remaining.
Thank you. With respect to the application, the amendment relating to the decommissioning plan, at present, the way the amendment is phrased, a decommissioning plan is not mandatory. It is within the discretion of the Planning Commission or the county board to impose. My understanding of what the consensus of the task force was that a decommissioning plan would be, quote, required, unquote. It is not required by this amendment. And my proposed change would require that a decommissioning plan be submitted with the application, not leaving it up to the discretion of the county planning commission or the county board whether or not to grant, whether or not to require. I'm going to jump to what I regard as the most important of all of these that has, as I said, not been included in these initial amendments from the task force. And that has to do with water quantity, water availability. I'll make this short.
You're okay. In light of the work that you put into this, you can finish presenting these ideas.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
At present, a natural resource district approved water well permit is required before an animal feeding operation can operate. However, that permit is not required to be obtained at the time that the application for the animal feeding operation permit is submitted to the planning department and ultimately to the planning commission and county board. As Karen Amon on the board of directors of the Lower Platte South Natural Resources District has testified before this body and before the planning commission in connection with the Raymond Central permit, the amount of time and energy and county money, taxpayer dollars, you all spend and staff spends developing these permit applications and presenting them to you and how you consider them, the time of experts testifying, the public testifying, all of that happens at a zoning permit hearing prior, and the only public hearing, I might add, for a CAFO application, without knowing whether or not there will be enough water to supply that operation with what it needs for its useful life. Similarly, there is no determination made by the Natural Resource District at the time you have to issue your permit or decide whether you're going to issue a permit, what the impacts of the drawdown on the existing aquifer for this proposed operation will be on neighboring uses. In the case of the Raymond Central permit, what impacts it will have on the school. What I'm suggesting is that there be a requirement that the ener-d approved water permit be obtained and submitted as the nutrient management plan in these amendments is required to be submitted with the initial permit application. That way, you all have the information necessary to determine whether even the minimum amount of water, which in this case is 50 gallons per minute well, pumping for 24 hours. That's what the Natural Resource District requires, the minimal requirement to give a well permit to any kind of well driller for use on their property. The more water that they expect to use, that well test increases in length as is appropriate. But the initial one is if you're going to pump more than 50 gallons per minute, you must have a well permit. I'm suggesting that this is data that the public needs and that you need to properly evaluate what the impacts of a proposed CAFO will be on the aquifer. I know this has been a subject that has been recently brought to your attention in the context of the trailer park, proposal up on Davie Road in Raymond. This is for a longer-term focus from you, but I would suggest that we're talking about it now in the context of CAFOs. I would suggest that the critical nature of this information, availability of water use, and impact of water drawdown by any special permit applicant, whether a CAFO or not, be information which this board and the Planning Commission and the Planning Department should have with an initial application. Thank you for your consideration.
That's good. Go ahead.
I just, if you have a copy of those proposed amendments or changes, could you provide them to the clerk so we could have a hard copy right now as
Absolutely.
we continue through the?
I also just, I just emailed them to the commission.
Okay.
So they should have,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
I have a question about the water scarcity or potential scarcity, which is one of my biggest concerns, and we've seen this, you're correct, with both of these recent special permits. But my understanding of the law essentially is that groundwater is a shared resource, and so the scarcity of that is also shared. So how can we regulate that? I mean, legally, because it is the biggest concern of mine is both the availability of water and then on the other end, of course, protecting any water sources.
Absolutely. Very good question. I actually spoke with Dick Ehrman on the staff of the Lower Platte South Natural Resource District yesterday. I spoke also with Karen Amon. I brought this question up. I indicated that this was going to be a proposed amendment brought before the county board today in connection with CAFO permitting. Dick Ehrman informed me that he spoke with his senior administrator at the Lower Platte South Natural Resource District after getting my text message about this, and that he spoke with their counsel, Steve Seglin, who is principal counsel to the Lower Platte South Natural Resource District, as well as, I believe, a couple of other natural resource districts in this southeastern Nebraska region. And all of them, Dick reported to me on the phone yesterday, told him that the Natural Resource District would have no objection, not only no objection, but that there is nothing in the Lower Platte South Natural Resource District's regulations which would impose any kind of prohibition or constraint on any county in requiring a natural resource district approved water well permit prior to an application for a CAFO being submitted to that county's planning department. They are neutral, effectively, is what I was told, with respect to the kind of requirement that I'm suggesting would be appropriate for you to adopt. I would also obviously expect that you would have your own county council look at this and confirm that natural resource district judgment. But having heard from Dick Ehrman that he has spoken with ener-d council, and also having spoken with Karen Amon on the board of the Lower Platte South ener-d, all of whom agree that there is nothing constraining the county from requiring this permit. And indeed, they also said, and I put this question to him afterwards, as well as to the first question. So he got input back from county council and senior administrator that it would also be acceptable in the ener-d's judgment for this board or the Planning Commission to require a longer aquifer test of a CAFO applicant at the time that the permit application is submitted, depending upon what the volume of water that applicant expects they're going to need for the lifetime of their permit. In some cases, as you know, in the case of the Randy Essing permit, it was 80 gallons per minute well with an 80 gallon per minute backup well. In the case of the Raymond Central application, I believe it was 140 gallons per minute well with a 140 gallon per minute backup well. As you get larger, and the operation gets potentially larger, the volume of water can become close to 1,000 gallons per minute. The drawdown on the aquifer can be dramatic. And unless a pump test or an aquifer test is required that is the length of which is commensurate with the amount of water expected to be used, then a 24-hour pump test is not going to tell you or the applicant how much water they're actually going to be able to have for their operation. This is, and I have worked my entire career with hydrogeologists on water contamination cases. It's part of my career. I can tell you this is very sensible water planning. and not to have this data in front of you when you're considering whether or not to issue a zoning permit for a special permit for a CAFO, medium or large, means you're making a decision partially blind, and that serves none of us well.
Any further questions? Yeah.
So you've got 3 tweaks, and then this, what you consider a significant change, Mr. Leo, that
That's
you're
correct.
proposing. And if I'm following you accurately, the change you would add to this text amendment is that these water testing requirements are done before the application comes to the board, as opposed to, if I'm just making sure I'm on solid ground here, as opposed to the system
Sure.
we're using now, which says they will be required eventually, we just don't know the outcome when we're approving the special permit. Which,
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. Exactly like the proposed amendment here regarding the requirement for a nutrient management plan approved by the by the by the NDEE, that there be an approved NDEE nutrient management plan submitted with the initial application to the planning department for a CAFO. My suggestion is the same with respect to the requirement for an ener-d water well permit, that permit be obtained, approved by the ener-d, and submitted by the applicant with its initial application to the planning department.
Okay. And to your point, you're absolutely accurate in that this is one of the biggest concerns we get on issues where we're proposing some kind of significant expansion outside the city limits. And so the advantage is the efficiency for the board to say, well, here's the water report, we know what we have, we can base our decision on that, as opposed to saying, we don't know what we have, we will know eventually, and then the permit will either kick in or be eliminated. What would be, and you're a very bright man, so I'm going to put you on the spot here, sir. Thank you for all the information you bring to us, but, and maybe somebody's going to testify on this. What would be the argument against making this change? Because I think there are people who would be concerned that this change it's already protected, it's in the special permits we might pass. What would be the argument against us adopting the change you're proposing?
One argument I could certainly imagine would be made is that the cost could be a burden on a CAFO operator. I don't know, for instance, in the context of Lincoln Premium Poultry's barn applications, how Lincoln Premium Poultry allocates costs, startup costs, administrative costs with its contract growers. So I don't know how internally they determine how these costs will be borne or shared. I know that probably the least expensive, and again, this information comes from the Lower Platte South NRD, the least expensive aquifer test or pump test, the 24-hour one for a 50-gallon per minute well, typically runs around $3,000. A 3-day or 72-hour aquifer test, which most hydrogeologists believe is necessary for a medium or large size CAFO to adequately determine how much water there will be for the operation, can cost $10,000 or more.
Okay.
I don't know, and again, how this cost is allocated, how it's capitalized, internalized in the pricing of the startup of the operation and the lifetime of the operation is critical in terms of how burdensome or not it is perceived to be at the outset of the process. But the bottom line is that it's got to be done before the operation can begin. I remember Jessica Coulterman saying here, if Mr. Essink can't prove to us that he can get an 80-gallon per minute well out of the aquifer on his property, we're not allowing him to build. My point, I think, on the countervailing side of what the cost up front might be, is that there is another cost up front if you make a decision on whether or not to grant a permit without that information in hand. And I think that it's better to require the party that wants to build and that has the money to build to factor in and internalize the costs of critical information like this, which they are going to have to spend anyway if they get their permit up front. And this also provides very important information to the planning department and to you as decision makers about what the resilience and productivity of a particular part of an aquifer within your jurisdiction actually is. And that has relevance beyond even the application at hand.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Further questions?
Could we get a copy of the?
You bet.
clerk's
Thank you
office?
so much. And
Do you need a copy? Or?
No, I've got one.
I just want to say it's, I guess it's been recently announced that Mr. Leo and his family won't necessarily be in our community all that much longer, and I think that's to our community's detriment. I think he's done an admirable work on this, and he's been a watchdog and a contributor. So I just want to thank him for the efforts. I don't know that anybody else outside of the CAFO task force members have done more work on this issue. So just
Agreed.
thank you,
Thank you.
thank you for doing what you can for our community, Mr. Leo. So, next up.
Next is Terry, is it Langan?
Yes, sir.
I got lost. I couldn't keep up. Different things.
Hi, my name's Terry Langan, Langan. I live on 6740 LaSalle in Lincoln, and I came today to testify in support of these amendments. And ask that you, well, thank you, first of all, for taking this into consideration so seriously and all of the hard work and the time that this issue so desperately needs here in our state, viewing the lack of current regulation for these permitting processes. Like you said, Mr. Leo has, and a lot of these folks have spent an enormous amount of time and energy looking at this issue. I'd also ask these last four amendments that have just been made, when you do have a chance to take a look at them, to please take those into consideration as well. I personally believe that if someone's going to benefit from using our shared resource as water, it's not a lot to ask to have them pay up front to determine if their operation is even feasible. That seems like a common sense step in a permitting process. I know we have to do it for the mechanical department on building permits. You have to show just cause of, the effects of your project beforehand. It seems to me that these amendments they follow Nebraska values. They're conservative, common sense. They look forward into our future for our children, for the future state of our water, our watershed. And I am in full support. Just ask that I appreciate your time. I'm not going to take all 5 minutes. That's all I have to say. But thank you again.
Thanks much.
Next is John Hanson.
I've been scared out of the room by John Hanson speaking before too, so.
Good morning. I am a member of the task force. I think we have, at least when I look around the room, I think there's 3 of us that are part of the 10. They're part of the task force. And I wanted to say that I thought that there was an awful lot of work, a lot of research, a lot of give and take, a lot of negotiation, a lot of compromise that went into this set of recommendations. And so given what I thought our task was and our charge was as a task force, I think that we did, a fairly good job of coming up with a much more comprehensive set of rules that make sense and also reflect, the very differing and competing interests and needs of the entire community. And so my background, I have worked on planning and zoning issues for a very long time, and one of the guiding principles of that is always trying to, at the end of the day, allow and encourage economic activity, but also do it in a fashion that respects the good neighbor rule. And so there's going to be compromise built into everything. So as a task force member, I've been before you several times, and of course the Planning Commission several times. And of all the things that we didn't get to, that makes a lot of sense. The issue of making sure we have an appropriate amount of water is one of the things that we didn't, in the scope of time and trying to bring everything together at the end, there was a lot of moving parts at the end. We just didn't get to that issue where it's not an issue that we considered and rejected. It was just an issue that we didn't get to. So that's kind of the status of that. I think Jonathan Leo's amendment makes sense. I think that's a reasonable thing to do. I do have a background in helping deal with competing and conflicting water uses. And where you have an area where you have relatively small confined aquifers, when you put a point of extraction in that's a large volume, a point of extraction or a well, then the cone of depression is more intense and more pronounced, and that means that the rest of the folks who are also in that aquifer and share water with you are going to be more heavily and directly impacted. And so where you have really large aquifers, then points of extraction have cones of depression, but they're less severe. So given Lancaster County's geology and hydrology, it seems to me that having making sure that you have adequate water is a good a business decision, but it's also a good neighbor, because the neighbors are going to be impacted. There's just no getting around it. So I am in support of that. And as I look at all of the things that woulda, coulda, shouldas, and all of that, I think that the one that I've identified before, when I've been before you, is that if I had my druthers, I think that the 1 mile, or that the setback for large CAFOs is a little too tight. Having it be a half mile, the same as medium, that really is not consistent, in my opinion, with the preponderance of the setback data that you've also received. And when you look at what our neighbors are doing, there's certainly a lot larger setbacks. And so Gage County, instead of a half mile, for example, is 1.5 miles for its large category. Oto is 2.5 miles. So you have a lot of different counties you can compare to, both neighboring counties but also larger counties. And so when you look at them, it would make more sense to me to differentiate between the large and the medium by increasing the large setback to 3/4 mile. I think that would be the more appropriate sort of middle of the pack setback level. And with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions. And I want to thank all of the task force members and the staff and the commission and the Planning Commission for all of your time and efforts in this effort. It's been, I think, a very good community exercise.
Can I ask a question? I initially was thinking about the setbacks very much in the being neighborly and not over impacting, a community. But now I'm thinking about it more in the use of water. Would increasing the setback or decreasing the setback affect that water usage potentially?
Well, the facility itself,
From the aquifer, I mean,
yeah.
Right?
Well, the large CAFO, just by the numbers, is going to use more water.
Right.
Than the medium. So just by virtue of the size, not so much the setback, the size itself is going to drive the fact that you have more.
Okay, yeah.
More animals. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't myself. I wouldn't
Yeah.
connect those two.
Yeah. Thank you.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Any questions?
I probably have one, but I'm not sure I could phrase it right
Right.
now, John.
Might come out like mine.
We're doing great work today.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you guys very much and good luck.
Okay, the last three people signed in are Harriet Gould, Lori Heiss, and Tim Kolkowski. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth and nothing but the truth? I do. And Harriet Gould is the first one signed in?
I just sent it to Commish, yeah.
I didn't,
Okay,
yeah,
so
I
it
don't
went to
see it.
Commish. That's
Yes,
why.
I sent it to Commish too.
Okay.
I can just, give me a second. I can just forward it individually.
Sorry,
to you.
Having some technical difficulties on this side.
I apologize. I thought everybody had it.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
I have just sent it to you each
Okay.
individually. Okay. Ms. Gould, please.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Harriet Gould.
Sorry.
I live at 2550 County Road A, Valparaiso, Nebraska. I presently serve as president of the Raymond Central Board of Education, and I'm speaking here this morning on behalf of the board and the community, the students, the staff, Raymond Central communities, and everyone else involved. First, I want to say thank you for the efforts that have gone into closely studying this issue. As anything that comes into an environment that's new, it requires a close look. And it appears that the process that has been put into place certainly has put a microscope on the issue. Not that all the issues have been solved to date, but we're looking at things much more closely, which is commendable. So thank you for your efforts here, the Planning Commission, your efforts. It's been a time-consuming process, but a very critical process because of the health and the safety of all those involved. I, too, am concerned about the document as it stands, and I would suggest and recommend looking at the amendments that Mr. Leo has brought forward to you. We are very concerned about the setback distances. The 1.5 mile setback to public use type of facilities, schools, cemeteries, daycare facilities, etc., I feel is limiting. I would recommend a minimum of 2.5 to 3 miles. The impact on a large CAFO or medium CAFO is not just concerning with water issues. That's major. And as you know, within our Raymond Central Public School District, the water issues are great. And we've struggled with finding water. Dr. Joel and I sat down with Dick Ehrman after the new study was released. And it appears that there isn't a lot of water out in our area. So recommending that water testing be done prior to the application process is a smart move. That makes sense. We also are very concerned about traffic issues. And if the setback is increased, that would put some of that traffic that would be increased away from the young drivers, parents bringing students to school, many trucks on gravel roads. There's still going to be problems with school buses and semis on gravel roads. And this past week, with the ice and the mud and so forth, it's been extremely difficult. So those are things I think that you need to take into consideration. Again, the water issues, the drawdown, and the impact that can have on our student population, not only when school's in session, but during the summertime. We have students in camps. There are lots of workshops and things that are going on. And so the facility is used a lot. And so when the water is being pulled in addition to drinking, but for cooling of the barns, that's going to be a major impact on the water consumption.
1 minute remaining.
We would, again, like you to support the concerns and the issues and amendments that Mr. Leo has brought forward. We're very concerned about the health, the safety, and the welfare of our students and the community. So we ask you to take that into consideration. Thank you very much for your time. Decisions are tough, but they're important. You're smart people. Make the right decision. Thank you.
Next is Lori Hines.
Hi. Still not very good at this, but here we go.
You're back.
My name is Lori Hess, and I live at 23800 Northwest 27th. My husband and I attended and spoke at the last two CAFO task force meetings and watched as a county board-appointed working group of varied agricultural backgrounds listened to and respected one another's opinions. They negotiated and were able to reach a compromise of what would be best for Lancaster County. They listened to experts, did their homework, and took 6 months to formulate regulations that were sorely needed as we didn't have any. They also took into account public places, especially schools, as our county has 3 schools in rural areas. I would never want another school to have to go through what we have gone through the last 7 months, and what will likely continue for the next year. We have spent hours in meetings and had to miss our kids' school events to discuss the location of these barns and student safety and welfare, all of which would have been prevented if any regulations had been in place. The notification process is seriously inadequate. The 2040 plan reads, notify surrounding property owners, interested groups, and other appropriate agencies of formal development applications. We had just a little over a week's notice, and even then we were misled with information that everyone within a mile radius was informed and those who were told were on board. This did not include those affected in Saunders County, as this site is right on a county line. Fortunately, due to the applicant's unpreparedness, our initial hearing was delayed twice. The opposition letters to this location reached 200. Clearly, not everyone was on board, including our elected school board at Raymond Central, who voted unanimously against the location of these barns. Rock Creek Village withdrew their intent to maintain Ashland Road as they were misled by the landowner. Saunders County sided with Rock Creek Village. Valparaiso Fire and Rescue did not sign off on this location due to road access and water availability. Ceresco Village Board voted against this location. Why aren't roads and water figured out prior to getting a permit? If the objective is to check the boxes, why aren't these vital entities in public safety included in this process? We reside in the second most populated county in the state. Neighboring and other highly populated counties either don't allow CAFOs like Douglas County or have much more stringent setbacks. Lancaster County is not even designated as a livestock-friendly county. A quarter of a mile is only 1,320 feet. These barns are 600 foot long. Should we be forced to live a little over 2 barn lengths away from 380,000 chickens? The task force started with greater distances and settled at a half a mile from homes and 1.5 miles from school. Given all I've learned about large CAFOs these past 6 months, I would like to see setbacks greater, at least 2 to 2.5 miles from schools for large CAFOs. Water is our most important and natural resource. It should be determined prior to obtaining a permit if enough water is available. There was discussion that it was too costly for the farmers up front. What about how much it is costing us all at this point? The cost when a Class C school does not have enough water to grow, remain open in 10 years, fight a fire. Water supply in our area is already a major concern and limited. Lastly, and above all, the 24 plan states under purpose entitled to secure safety from fire, panic, and other dangers to promote health and general welfare. The safety, health, and general welfare of students is paramount for Raymond Central, and according to the 2040 plan, it should be paramount for Lancaster County as well. Thanks.
Do we have another copy of this?
A short one.
Sorry about
Good morning. I'm Tim Kalkowski, Kalkowski, 1916 Devonshire Drive, Lincoln, Nebraska. I was one of the 10 members on the Animal Feeding Operation Working Group, and I'd like to give you a little insight of what my thought process was during this process. I personally believe there needs to be a balance in Nebraska and Lancaster County when it comes to the zoning of AFOs. I'm concerned about a clean, safe, healthy environment for my children and grandchildren, but I'm also concerned with food safety, and I think that's been highlighted recently with the China rotavirus, because I believe that was started by eating exotic animals. So food safety is a huge concern of mine. The United States produces the safest food in the world, and Nebraska is at the epicenter of that. Here's some facts from the Nebraska Department of Ag fact card dated February 2019. Nebraska ranks #1 in the country in commercial red meat production, commercial cattle slaughter, all cattle on feed, Great Northern bean production, and popcorn production. Nebraska ranks 2 in all cattle and calves, hay production, and bison. 3rd in corn production. 5th in soybean production, cash receipts from all crops, sugar beet, egg and egg product exports, pork and pork product exports. We produce 2 billion gallons of renewable fuel annually. Cash receipts from marketings contribute $21 billion to Nebraska's economy, and for every dollar in agriculture export generates $1.28 in additional economic activities. I think I can safely say agriculture pays the bills in Nebraska. So what does this have to do with Lancaster County? Obviously, Lancaster County is diverse in their crop production, poultry production, swine production, all types of livestock production. But most importantly, Lancaster County is where our state legislature is located and where our policies and laws are created. It is also the home of our land-grant university, where some of the top agricultural research in the world is conducted. So Lancaster County is an integral part of what we do in Nebraska. So I want to talk about our working group. So our working group tried to use a balanced approach by having solid, well-thought-out, common-sense thinking when considering zoning regulations in Lancaster County. We differentiated between enclosed AFOs and open AFOs, knowing that there's a huge difference in odor and how waste is managed in those type of facilities. We also mirrored what the Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy, NDE, recognized as large, medium, and small AFOs. So we mirrored what their regulations were. We felt that the setbacks for a large open AFO at 1 mile should be more than an enclosed AFO, which was a half mile. We also wanted to take in consideration traffic flow in those operations, so we set an additional 1.5 for large AFOs from public structures such as schools, hospitals, and churches, and a 1 mile setback for the medium-sized AFOs. We asked that when filing an application that a site plan be provided, a construction and operating permit be approved by NDEE, which included the nutrient management plan, a road maintenance agreement be in place, and that the Nebraska Animal Feeding Operation Siting Assessment Matrix be completed.
1 minute remaining.
It will take some work and thought to make the application for a special permit for an AFO. We were concerned about the decommissioning of these facilities when their lifespan is finished, so we asked that there be a decommissioning plan in place for removing and reusing all facilities. We asked for a conservation buffer to be established to help with the odor in the surrounding landscape. We also increased the amount of notification time for a public hearing to 30 days so all parties would have adequate time to prepare. So the real question is, by adopting regulations like our group recommended, are we leaving Lancaster a better place for the next generation? I would argue that we are creating a sustainable economic environment and the safest food in the world while also trying to protect our environment. It's a balancing act, and I think there's a place for both issues. And I would be glad to make a couple comments on the water if you would like. I know I'm past time, but I do have some thoughts on that.
He can make them or I can ask him.
Go ahead. Just a note from our last meeting.
Just to make it official, my question to you is, what are your comments about the water?
Okay, thank you. I was going to propose in our last meeting, and this was my note right here, applicant must prove that they have adequate water supply for the operation. The reason I did not make that a motion, and this is my opinion, is coming from a ranch operation. And I understand what's required in these facilities, and whether it's hogs, cattle, or chickens, and particularly chickens, it requires, they have to have water like every 2 hours in order to survive. They're not going to put these multi-million-dollar facilities in unless they have adequate water. I'm pretty confident that they have researched that. And I also have to think that we got to look at comparison. An irrigation well pumps 800 to 1,000 gallons a minute, and we're talking 800 to 100 gallons a minute. So there's, if you look around and there's irrigation wells, there's a huge difference in volume. As far as water testing, Ward Labs, you can do a test for $25. We do that on our ranch about annually to check our water quality. And then quantity with the ener-ds, they do have the ability, they pump these wells down, they measure how long it takes to recharge, and they can tell you within some certainty, they've been doing this for years, what the availability for water. But I would agree, if there's a concern for water, then there probably shouldn't be an AFO in that area. But there's ways to test that I think they've been doing for years, so.
Tim, have you had a chance to see the amendments proposed by Mr. Leo?
No, I have not.
Okay. I didn't know if you felt that they were in compliance with what the working group was intended to accomplish.
The water, I'm in agreement. I mean, we got to be careful with the water. That is a very precious resource, but I think we have ways to deal with that, with the testing and so on and so forth. The setbacks, that's why we differentiated between enclosed and open.
And I was referring to the proposed amendments, which don't deal with setbacks.
Okay, it did water.
It was,
I thought setback was part of it.
Nutrients.
The siting matrix.
The nutrient management plan.
And mandating a decommissioning plan rather than simply having a provision that allows for it.
And then the water test. Yeah, the water test before or after.
Okay, the nutrient management plan, that's part of, in my understanding, part of the NDEE process when you get an application. So that nutrient management plan should already be a part of that, in my opinion, and that was what we were trying to have happen.
And I
okay?
can ask those questions to Steve as well, so.
Okay. The matrix, Leo is exactly right. It's subjective, so we didn't want to put a score on it because we didn't want to skew something. But we felt that it was important to have it because it does ask a lot of good questions. And we wanted the applicant to be thinking about that and to make sure that they were thinking about those questions. So that's why we put it in there. And then the last one was, I'm forgetting.
Mandating the decommissioning plan rather than simply allowing for it.
Before you answer, I made an error, and I'd like to correct an error I made in my testimony, if I may, very briefly, because that directly impacts what you were just asked.
Okay.
I want to apologize. I incorrectly stated that the proposed amendment recommended by the task force regarding a decommissioning plan says that the decommissioning plan is discretionary. It is not. The decommissioning plan is required.
Okay, that was going to be one of my questions, because I really thought it was. Okay.
With the application. I misspoke.
Okay.
What is discretionary is the requirement that a bond or equivalent financial resource be posted with the decommissioning plan. That is what is discretionary for the Planning Commission or the County Board. My proposed amendment would require that there be a bond or equivalent financial resource along with the required decommissioning plan. And I apologize for
Thanks.
my error.
Okay.
Thanks for that clarification, even though I think it was technically a breach of etiquette, but we're actually glad to have it, so thanks.
Yep, and that's what I was going to say. It was part of our proposals to have a plan in place. So.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
A few questions for you, sir, if you're okay with that. What is your particular background? How do you come with the knowledge that you're providing? You are a rancher, or you're involved in a ranch?
Yeah, we ranch and farm in northern Nebraska, and I would say we're very stewardship-oriented, conservation-oriented, and then I also do banking out of First State Bank, and I'm an ag lender.
And you do live in Lincoln, or you don't?
Yes, do.
Thought so, okay. Very good. You were on the task force, and you were in the debates on these setbacks, and we're hearing different thoughts on the setbacks, but your group discussed these at great length, and this was what the group at large felt was appropriate for this time.
Yes, there was great debate on the setbacks, and again, the enclosed versus the open, that was fairly important, knowing that there's difference in smell and how you handle the waste. And then that was the middle ground that we come up with, is what I would say.
Because there are some who would want them shorter, and some who felt like they could have been longer.
Correct, exactly.
And am I right that regarding the setbacks, it was the group considered a 3/4 of a mile setback and took a vote on it, and it failed just barely, right, by one vote?
I can't remember the exact vote, but that would be reasonable, because we did have discussion and we failed, and then we reworded it, and I believe part of that was the open and enclosed, actually, so, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
And just clarifying on the water, because the points you made, they resonated so much, Tim, and I just want to thank you. This balance between economic opportunity for folks and yet protecting the larger community, that's what we feel like our responsibility is. The water, I got a little bit lost, and that's because there's other things going on, but you are in favor? You think it's appropriate to demand the water or to have the water test as a requirement, or you think that the protections are adequate with the system the way it is?
The reason I did not put that as part of our proposal or provide the verbiage, because I had it written down, is I just felt that it was pretty common sense. If you're going to put a $2 to $4 million facility in, they're going to check the water and know if they have adequate water. But I am fine with adding something in there about water because I understand the importance of it. And I also think you can test your water levels pretty easy. I think a well driller can come out, pump it out, see what the recharge is. That's how we tested our wells on the farm. And then the water testing, I think, can go to these labs and they can test that. I don't think it has to be this huge expense, is what I was trying to say.
Right. And my understanding is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, everybody, but is that currently the water testing is required. It's just not required as an element of the initial application of the special permit. And that's really what we're talking about, is moving up the water testing to be an element of the initial application, which I personally think makes very good sense. But we'll get into that in a little bit.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks for putting up with us.
I did not get on the sign-in sheet. I'll sign in here. My name is Melissa Baker. I live at 7125 Yosemite Drive here in Lincoln. And I first would just like to thank the entire CAFO task force. I know there's 3 members here today for all their hard work. I support the recommendations they put in front of you today. And I just have a few more comments, but I'd also like to thank you for all of your time and attention in this really serious manner. There's a lot going on, and you guys putting all of the work into it, and the CAFO task force means a lot, and people like John Leo and other people in the community that have really sacrificed a lot of their time as well is really important. So thank you. This is what makes our community a better place. So it's really cool to be a part of that. So what I'd like to just reiterate and just echo really quick.
Yes.
Okay, you were sworn in as
Yes,
part.
Melissa,
She was sworn in.
Melissa did, she swore in.
Yep, I was behind Harriet and Lori, yeah. So yeah, I did not speak at the Raymond Central. I withdrew my name at the last second to let Karen Amon speak during that special permit hearing. The reason just being, I was afraid she would not have the time, being pressed on time. So I didn't speak, but I'm here to just kind of say and reiterate what I felt that day. And what Karen had brought then and what's been brought up again is, testing and checking this water prior to that county process, I think, is extremely vital and important. It makes common sense. They're going to be paying for that one way or another. It's a part of it. So having you guys have that information is extremely important. It saves a lot of time and taxpayer money as well. So I'd also just like to suggest that increase in setbacks for large CAFOs, public space. Yes, there is other economic development as well that can be affected when you have a large CAFO that is moved in right next to your property or next to your business. So, we do want to support agriculture in Nebraska. We do want to support economics in Nebraska, but we also want to, be conservative with our water. And really do what's best for neighbors and for everyone, for schools and for our children. Just to reiterate a little bit of what like Lori had brought up, just better notice and communication, that 1 month public notice via some type of public record. There's so many people that when they're on a neighboring county, they have zero notice. They hear about these things after the fact. They have no opportunity to come to a meeting and just give their 3 minutes of, their opposition or support, whatever that is. But regardless, adequate public notice is extremely important and has been brought up. The environmental impact review and the nutrient management plan on large CAFOs required prior to county process and public hearings. I know you've heard John Leo talk about this over and over. He is so brilliant and he has been so dedicated to this, and I really thank him for all these points. This book has been presented to you by Edison, but the disaster funds, the decommissioning required haul agreements, so those costs don't fall on taxpayers, and even the disposal plan for dead birds, so that we can avoid any kind of disease epidemics or any kind of situation that would just be absolutely god-awful. So we know those things have happened. Let's make sure that we're being conservative and thoughtful to prevent those types of things. And again, that's pretty much all I have to say. I'd like to just leave an invitation for everybody here as well. One thing that I've been concerned more than anything about is the water. So we are doing an event called What's in Your Water. It's a multi-group put this together, and Dick Ehrman will be there. He's on the panel speaking about that, and that's at Hardin Hall at the end of this month on Thursday, February 27th at 6:30 in the Hardin Hall Auditorium. I'd like to invite everybody there. It's a free public event so people can get engaged about the conversations about water. Specifically focused on water quality for this event, but I'd like to invite you all and everybody in the community to be a part of it, and thank you again for your time.
Is there any further proponent testimony? Anybody else who would like to testify as a proponent? Okay, is there any opponent testimony? Anyone who would like to come down as an opponent? And I'll be the first to tell you I've been fairly loose with proponent testimonies, so if I wouldn't put very strong time constraints on opponents. I'm not saying any opponent testimony. Oh. Opponent. It means you're against the. There's also.
Let's just.
There will also be an opportunity for neutral testimony if you would like to. Okay. And like I said, I've been pretty loose with the opponent testimony, so I'll just go ahead and let you say your piece.
I'm Nancy Packard.
I'll need to swear you in. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes. I'm Nancy Packard, P-A-N-A-N-C-Y, P-A-C-K-A-R-D, of 3037 Sewell Street in Lincoln. My life spans this whole issue. Well, very much spans this whole issue. I grew up on a farm in Nebraska. The farm had chickens, cows, etc., and we could give you a good rendition of all those voices. I had the grand champion pig at the York County Fair. I milked cows before I got on the school bus to go to school, high school. After I graduated, I went off, as all my family did, to become a teacher. Then I moved back to a rather smallish town in Nebraska. We were only marginally troubled by hogs that were raised underground. We detected the smell of hogs underground on certain days. Later, much later, my husband and I built a home in the country, this same issue that people are concerned with now. And we were not so far from a cattle lot, and very often there was a strong scent. Then in my last years, I drove to see my mother every weekend past a huge cattle lot that you could smell for miles. So I don't like that. None of us do. But it sounds to me like you're doing a pretty good job of looking out for the interests of the people who live nearby, maybe the people who drive by. Sounds like, and I read through all the 30-some pages of information, so I may be missing some vital information. So I apologize if I miss something or misspeak, because I'm unaware of some facts.
No, you're doing fine.
But my big issue is not just water testing for those farmers who want to, those are not farmers who, those are big operations that want to put in, for the most part, meat growing plants. My real concern is our nest egg, our golden egg, our underground water in Nebraska. You know times are a-changing. You know there's flooding that wreaks havoc unexpectedly all over the place. You know that the population is growing all over the world, and many people do not have water. We have got to take care of this water that we have. We are unique almost in the world with our aquifer, and I realize it's not the deepest part right here, but we've got to, that is my concern. Let's see, 75 years ago, people were not making decisions that might affect Nebraska forever. The decisions to put in animal operations that might somehow affect, nitrates in the water, for instance, are huge. I think that's all I have to say. That is my real concern. I think it sounds to me like the task force did a good job of protecting people and balancing the agricultural and the city or the homeowner interests. But let's see, the name has changed from DEQ to DCEE something. All of our regulatory agencies, are being dismissed and under fire. And when I looked at that, what did you call that little form? I think there were only two places that looked into the water the water and land situation that these people will build on. That is the most important part. And if we're deregulating and decommissioning, who knows whether that will even be important in a couple of years or whether that will be heeded. So I think I've made my point, haven't I?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there any other opponent testimony? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to anyone here to testify in a neutral capacity? Anyone here to testify in a neutral capacity? Okay. Return to staff then. Any comments staff would like to make?
Just to clarify a few points that were brought up. The construction operating permit does include the nutrient management plan. That's why it wasn't listed out separately. So that would be a requirement with the construction operating permit, so that we thought that information would be available.
Yeah, that was my understanding too, and that was
Yes.
going to be, I had that question too, so thanks.
Yes. And when we were looking at the wording in regards to any necessary documentation versus all, we thought that if there was any question about any of the documentation, that would be any necessary documentation. So we thought all, it was the exact same phrasing in terms of if we thought something was missing, any allowed us to require that any information that's necessary would be provided. So we thought we were requiring basically the same thing. And then, yes, as a clarification was, a decommissioning plan is required. A bond isn't necessarily required. And the reasoning there was, let's say you come forward and you only have 2 barns, and your decommissioning plan says, I intend to turn those barns into farm use if I no longer am raising chickens, for instance, or hogs, or whatever it would be. Well, you don't really need to have a bond for you to switch it from chickens or hogs to agricultural use. In other words, you're not really going to do anything. You're going to leave the barns there and use them. And so that's why we left in the if necessary or if required. Now, if the plan is you're going to have 12 barns and there's no reasonable way 12 barns could be reused and some of them need to be demolished, then yes, you could then require the bond because that's what was stated in the decommissioning plan. So that's why it was left a little bit in terms of if or may. And I would note there was a question that was raised just for information. Yes, when the working group was looking at their votes in terms of setbacks, some of them were quite close. They did have a vote to have a 1-mile setback for residential, including enclosed, and that lost by a 4-to-5 vote.
Right.
Some of the other votes were 6-3 or 5-4 in approving the various setbacks. The 1-mile setback for the medium ones, the medium-sized ones to the special uses, the public use, the cemeteries, that was the only one that was unanimous. That was 9-0. So, yes, I think as some of the speakers talked about, there was definitely some who might have liked it larger, some who might have liked it smaller, and so this was the one that was recommended by the group as a whole.
Right.
In terms of water, we did have Paul Zelig with the ener-d spoke to the group early on, and as Tim Kalkowski noted, there was time for folks to bring up water. I think some of the discussion focused on well, how much should you spend in advance when you don't really know if your special permit is going to be approved, because a construction operating permit is also quite expensive. So I think that was something that was taken into account, as well as if you don't require the water permit up front, it certainly has to be accomplished if your well is going to be over 50 gallons a minute later. So it's not like you're letting them out of something. It's a permit they have to have through the ener-d if the well is over 50 gallons a minute.
Okay.
I do want to ask Steve just a follow-up question. So this water issue, we always come back to it, it seems.
Certainly.
Like sooner or later. But I'm just want to make sure I've narrowed the focus to where on the issue, it's not a question of whether the water testing is going to be done and the water standards be known and then approved. It's a question of, do we ask the applicants to do it before they have an approved special permit, or do we allow them to do it after the special permit's been approved?
Correct. So as recommended by the working group, it would be something that would come later. It wouldn't be something that was submitted as a part of the application.
Yeah. And so then, what we're seeing is, even knowing that that's the case, it doesn't give a lot of comfort to folks in the area. We're seeing a lot of unease over this uncertainty over water.
Sure, and certainly, even if you could show, yes, I had adequate water on my site, because I did do a well test, often the testimony is from people 1 mile away, 2 miles away, as to what is the impact of this operation on my well at some distance, and that's what we've heard from the ener-d. It's often quite difficult to determine is what might the impact be of this use on other uses, because we also have to realize there'll be other wells dug in the area as well for residential use or potentially for farm use. So it's the impact is what is difficult to know.
There's several comments about notification. When you do a notification, does it go into the next county? I mean, how does that happen?
It would be difficult. Our requirement is to try to notify in terms of newspapers and that type of thing, or a county clerk. We'd certainly do our best if we can find those addresses. We can work with our own assessor to get those addresses. They're a little more difficult when it goes into the next county. So we hope by signing the site, those type of things, we also provide some extra notification. Certainly with this change, this permit alone will have the greatest time before the hearing of notification. So there'll be at least many more weeks than normal just for this one kind of application.
Just to touch on that, by statute, there are requirements for notification for outside of counties, and there's certain things that make that come into play, whether or not we have to notify the county clerk or the planning department, I think it's planning director. There's certain situations that are already required.
In statute that we have to reach out to the adjoining counties, okay.
Yep, and then it'd pretty much be up to their own process of how they would notify their own constituents.
So as drafted, we will have to notify property owners within 1 mile, 30 days before the public hearing.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? Thanks, Steve.
Sean, I'd like to let you know that the clerk received several emails regarding text amendment 19010. In support, we have emails from Jean Sedovy, Harriet Gould, and Angie Peterson, and in opposition from the Wachiska Ottoman Society.
Okay. All right. With that, then, we will go ahead and close the public hearing and move on down to the correlating item.
I would request a break for one thing, I want to look at the information that we received this morning. I haven't looked at it yet.
I actually think a restroom break would
be helpful to me.
Be appropriate.
And, yes, and since my computer is broken, I'm trying to read it on my phone. A couple more minutes would be good.
Okay. Let's go ahead and recess and then come back at 11 a.m.
to the Lancaster County zoning resolution, Article 2 definitions, Article 4 AG district, Article 13 special permits, and Article 22 general provisions as provided in Exhibit A.
Okay. The county clerk's staff informed me that there was one member of the public who missed the opportunity to speak at the public hearing. We do normally allow people to make comments on items of new business as is usual. So since, quite frankly, I've been a little bit loose with the times here today, I am going to let the gentleman speak, but I am going to keep you to 5 minutes just like everybody else. So
Absolutely. So I would like to speak to this resolution. I think there needs to be a reality check.
Could you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, I'm Peter Daubin. I live at 12251 Bob White Trail. I live in southwest Lancaster County. I live actually next to the S-Sync CAFO that this council commission approved. And in doing so, you actually destroyed my life. But that's not what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is a reality check. And the reality check is very, very simple. You supposedly represent Lancaster County, and I presume that you want to improve the economy of Lancaster County. So let us just consider the facts. The economy of the state of Nebraska is about $100 billion. You can check this. It's a matter of public record. If you count up everything that is agricultural in this state, horses, corn, beans, cows, pigs, chickens, sorghum, corn, wheat, everything, you come up with a whacking big $11 billion. That's about 11% of the total economy of the state of Nebraska. That's the state. We can make a fair assumption that that is not representative of Lancaster County. Lancaster's county economy depends on other things. If you allow CAFOs in Lancaster County, as you have, you are basically carpet bombing the county's economy. What is the attraction of living in this county? It is having an acreage. It certainly is not the shopping in Lincoln, the nightlife in Lincoln, or the ambiance of Lincoln. It is whatever we have in this county, and there is not much to attract high-tech businesses here except the acreages. So if you allow CAFOs in this county without caution or due diligence as to where they are placed, as you did in the case of the Randy S-Sync CAFO, you are surely, without question, doing immense damage to the economy of this county. I realize that religion practically in this state is that we are an agricultural state. Everybody says so, but that doesn't make it true. It hasn't been true for 20 years. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your comments. Okay. So the way I see it, it looks to me like there's a number of issues in front of us. I think there's three kind of major points that I keep hearing that are echoed through the conversation. The first is the possibility of increasing the large CAFO setbacks to 3/4 of a mile from 1/2 mile. The second would be possibly mandating a bond, presumably for, no one added this, I'm adding this, but I would think presumably adding a bond for large size operations only to be attached to the decommissioning plan, rather than just simply allowing a provision, or having a provision that allows it. I didn't state that very clearly. And then finally, requiring the NDEE hydrological testing be made a required element of the initial application of the special permit, rather than having it towards we'll say the second half of the permit process. Does that, and the public is encouraged to nod or shake their head no if they think that I'm straying from the mark. I'm saying nodding heads mostly. So I think those are kind of the 3 points to be discussed before us right now. I think our county attorney staff had some comments to make.
Yeah, I was going to ask Jen.
Requesting some clarification regarding the bond requirement.
All right, so as far as the bond goes, if you guys want a bond required as a condition of the special permit, you guys can do that. The issue that we may come across is having the bond be required with the application. The issue with that is because I don't know if a bond company would actually issue a bond when there's nothing there. If the special permit isn't approved yet, kind of like with our purchasing contracts, we get bonds for certain purchasing contracts. A lot of times those are dated when the contract starts. So having the bond before the application, I would suggest against that as because I don't think that's even possible. But if you want to require a bond to be a part of as a condition of the special permit, which could be then in place when operations start, that is something that you could do. Now, kind of to a point that Steve made, the reason that it is drafted the way it is it allows your discretion based on the application, based off the number of barns, based off of their intended use after this is. It kind of is so you can look at the different facts that play into the decommissioning plan, and whether, based on their decommissioning plan, whether you think a bond should be required. And so that's why we have it discretionary and in there as it is right now.
In your recommendation, where in that process, I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
Where in that process would you require said bond?
So I would.
The initial.
So as of right now, the way it is worded is the decommissioning plan is required. And then based off of everything that comes with the application and through the process, then it would be up to the planning commission, or if it comes before the before the county board, then you could require the bond as a condition. And that would be when it starts. So essentially, once the special permit is approved and they start operations, that's when the bond would then be in place. And so that would be my suggestion, is keeping it the way it is worded.
That is really important to me, and I see it and read it that way. I just want to be sure that it's always applied that way into perpetuity, right? But beyond us is more, so I'm just thinking, is there a clarification that could be made?
Can we not just simply say that for the large permit, the large size operations, we require bonding, we may require it for one smaller than that, for small and medium?
Well, in decommissioning, we've talked about it several times, and we talked about it when we did cell towers. We talked about it when we did wind turbines.
Yep.
I mean, it's kind of in our mindset that we are looking ahead to make sure we're protecting, the future. So it's not specifically unique to this, but something that we need to be conscious of always.
Just to try to keep the conversation organized, are there any other comments from the board regarding bonding and how we want to handle the bonding? Does anyone want to make a motion on how we handle the bonding?
Well, if we make no motion, it falls back to the text amendment as presented to us.
Right.
Without any changes.
Which means we could require it at any time.
Yeah, we can.
Right.
We're proposing
We
the
can.
idea that we might say we are going to require it every time on large CAFOs. That's the distinction.
I am really supportive of the idea of requiring a bond for the large-sized CAFOs only. I understand we probably can't put it at the beginning of the process, but I do think, we clearly have some mechanism for requiring bonds. I think we should make the large-size operations, that's just automatic. The people coming to the table should just know that at the beginning, that we are going to require that. So it's just a known entity.
So will be a condition of large AFOs and could be or shall be.
Yeah, we're mandate.
The rest of it would be as it's
Yeah,
written.
so I would say mandate a bond for large-size AFOs, for the large-size AFO decommissioning plan.
As a condition of the permit, though.
As a condition of the permit.
Right.
Yeah.
Starting when the AFO is up and in business, the bond goes into effect.
Have to get the bond as part of the special permit, and it would become active once it begin operation.
Yeah, it would be a condition
Yeah.
of the special
Yeah.
permit.
Yeah.
Okay. Like I said before, is there, I mean, we're discussing it, it seems like we're nodding in agreement. Do we have a motion?
So I would move that we make a bond, a condition, a decommissioning bond, a condition of any large AFO, and that it could also be a condition of any application.
Yeah, the mediums won't change.
Right, right.
Is that clear?
Yeah, I guess what I would suggest is, I don't even know how I would suggest this, maybe make a final motion with all the proposed amendments, like you move approval with whatever the kind of consensus is, that way it's clear for the record,
Okay.
the motion, and then each of what you guys are wanting amended.
Okay, all right.
Are you going to withdraw the motion?
Yes, I will withdraw that motion.
All right, so then I think the next point is requiring the NDEE hydrological testing to be made a requirement of the initial application for the special permit.
I think this is makes a very strong statement that we want to protect this important natural resource.
Yep. I think this is just good common sense. Tim Klasky was saying that, he was saying the only reason they didn't talk about it before was he just assumed that you would do something. I mean, so I think it makes perfect sense.
So my suggestion as far as the water goes, I would suggest not approving the language as proposed to you in the amendments. What I would do is more base it on if, due to the size of the proposed well, if the ener-d requires a permit, then that be submitted with the application.
And any of these would fit that requirement, anything that we've seen, I mean.
Yeah, the two that you've had before you would be that capacity. But I wouldn't suggest requiring the ener-d to issue permits that they wouldn't necessarily do. I don't even know if you can require the ener-d to do something that they might already have regulations.
Won't they be surprised?
Yeah, I would not suggest doing that. So I do have some proposed language. It is
That would be helpful.
just an idea. I'll work on.
Our poor county attorney staff.
So-
We're just making them tap
So
dance
probably
for
what
us.
we're going to have to do is direct you to
Yes.
prepare language. We're going to bring it back next week. But we're taking a vote today to direct you with these maybe two issues that we'd like to.
Yeah, and you could even just vote to approve it and then direct me to make the changes as discussed. And then this would just be attached and moved along.
Could you read that for us, please?
So
If the lower,
if the Lower Platte South NRD requires a well permit due to the size of the well, the permits shall be submitted with the application. So essentially, if the NRD requires it due to the factors that they look at, then it would be required.
okay. And it seems like we have consensus on this one, right?
I think so.
Okay. And then moving on, I think the last issue to discuss is, do we want to have a conversation about the setbacks? Right now, for large-sized CAFOs, the setbacks are half a mile. That is the same setback distance for medium-sized CAFOs.
From a dwelling.
Yep, from a dwelling, sorry, from a residence. And when the task force looked at this issue, they considered a full mile setback on large-sized CAFOs. It failed 4-5. That's what our planning department staff was reminding us there. So I think here the members of the public have suggested a 3/4 of a mile setback. What does the board think on that?
I know Rick and I had the opportunity to attend the open meeting. I think we were Scott Middle School. And I really appreciate all the discussion that went on there, back and forth between people testifying and comments within the working group itself. And I know that they've debated a long time. There's been a lot of consensus building trying to get to the point that they are. And I'm interested in staying with the recommendations as proposed in the text amendment.
So you prefer a half-mile setback for the large?
I want to keep it as it is,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
The task force put a lot of work into this, and this is the conclusion they came to. I can see the benefits of 3/4 of a mile from a dwelling. I think I would support a 3/4 mile setback from a residence. And that would be the only change in setbacks we would be proposing, is my understanding.
Yeah, even though some members of the public have discussed, some of those public use setbacks being set back farther, the CAFO task force passed that 9-0. I'm inclined to keep the public use setbacks the same at 1.5 miles.
Yeah.
This is the only one that I'm with Commissioner Vest on this one. This is the
Yeah.
only one that I would really be interested in looking to expand, which is the 3/4 of a mile to 1/2 mile.
On the large.
On the large size CAFOs from residences, yeah.
And that is somewhat reflective of the task force struggling to find the right amount, because they almost, if one person changes their vote, it's a mile.
It's a full
instead
mile,
of a half
yeah,
mile.
Yeah, I'm in support of that. I mean, I think it hinders what people can do with their own personal property, essentially, if they live closer than that, so
Okay. So then,
God help us, now we gotta make a bid, but.
okay.
I would also like to remind you that the effective date, we also need an effective date for you guys to pick an effective date.
For these to go into effect?
Yes,
Oh,
Next Tuesday?
that would be fine.
Yeah.
I don't see why not.
So,
To summarize.
I would entertain a motion
Yeah, it'll be
Two.
entertaining.
increase the large AFO setbacks from 3/4 of a mile.
No.
No,
From, I would entertain a motion to increase large CAFO setbacks to 3/4 of a mile from 1/2 mile. Additionally, we would include a decommissioning bond as part of the application process for large-size AFOs. And finally, we would require that the NDEE hydrological testing be made a required element of the initial application for the special permit.
I will make that a motion.
and I will second that.
I have one question of clarification.
Please, yeah.
The large AFO setback, so right now it's 1.5 miles, you're wanting it 1,
This is for residences?
Residential.
From residences.
Half mile?
What are you looking at?
I guess the proposed language, do you know what they're talking about?
Sorry.
Steve,
let's
come up
hope.
here.
So we're looking at number 5, correct?
Right.
Not number 6.
So I have what I can see is a setback for open, enclosed, and then large and medium.
The 1.5 mile, I think, was for the public use, is what I think you're
Yeah,
saying.
so this is all regards to the residential, and the residential currently for enclosed is a 1/2 mile for both medium and for large.
Okay.
So if you wanted to, you'd be splitting it, in other words. So if you wanted it just for the large to be 3/4 of a mile, it would remain for enclosed a 1/2 mile for the medium.
That is my understanding.
Okay, sorry.
One other clarification. So as Jen was showing you the discussion about the permit, that was from the Lower Platte South NRD, not NDEE. So just want to clarify, that you were looking for the permit from the Lower Platte South NRD versus the Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy.
I thought we were saying that if the Lower Platte South NRD was requiring a well permit, that then we would require the NDEE hydrological testing to be part of that. I thought we were using the Laurel Pass South well permit as the triggering event. That if in that case, then we're going to require the NDEE hydrological testing to be done as an initial part of the special permit itself.
And I guess I would have to, well, in the next week, we'll have to check and see what is the NDE hydrological testing? What section does that fall with under? Because most of the discussion has regarded the ener-d well permit.
Yeah, I thought, sorry, my suggested change was just based off the ener-d, which is, I thought, what you guys were talking about.
Whatever testing is, we just want it moved from the end to the beginning.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
However you.
Right, and that is the ener-d well permit is a requirement. I don't know if the NDEE has some hydrological testing that is required or not. The ener-d certainly has a well permit. If it's over 50 gallons a minute, yes, that's a requirement. And this is saying, hey, that would have to be at the front as a part of your application. You have to show that that's approved.
I understood.
Okay,
NRD.
I think I was just mistaken. It's the NRD that does the water testing, not the NDEE. So allow me to restate that last part then. The third part of my motion to entertain, or I guess I didn't make the motion, Deb made the motion, but I was stating it, would then be requiring the NRD hydrological testing to be required as an element of the initial application of the special permit.
Correct, and that'd be the ener-d well permit.
Right, the well permit.
Okay.
Yep.
And all this would become effective on February 11th.
Well, that was super clear.
I got it.
Jen will
Now I
make
got
us
it.
look
Your county government at work.
Jed.
Okay.
So yeah, if you guys go ahead with approval, then I will get that language drafted, and it'll just be attached to the resolution, and will go into effect next Tuesday.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Yocum,
Yes.
Vest,
Yes.
Shore,
Yes.
Flowerday.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0.
Very good.
Are we ready to adjourn?
We
We
have Board of Equalization.
adjourn and then Board of Equalization.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Yocum,
Yes.
Vest,
Yes.
Shore,
Yes.
Flowerday.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0.
We are adjourned. Now we are going to convene the Board of Equalization meeting.
A copy of the Nebraska Open Meetings Act is located on the wall at the rear of the hearing room. Additionally, a copy of all written material to be discussed at today's open meeting is available from the county clerk staff at the front of the hearing room. The material can also be viewed on the county's website at lancaster.ne.gov. Agenda on 1 or minutes. Approve the minutes of the Board of Commissioners meeting held on Tuesday, January 21st, 2020.
Move approval?
And I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Please call the roll.
Shore,
Yes.
Yocum,
Yes.
Vest,
Yes.
Flowerday.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0.
Okay.
Number 2 are additions and deductions to the tax assessment rolls.
Move approval of the additions and deductions?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Please call the roll.
Vest,
Yes.
Shore,
Yes.
Yocum,
Yes.
Flowerday.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0. Number 3 is public comment.
Are there any members of the public looking to speak on items relating to the Board of Equalization? Not listed on the, items listed, not listed on the agenda. Seeing no members of the public, we will close public comment.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for adjournment. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Yocum,
Yes.
Vest,
Yes.
Shore,
Yes.
Flowerday.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0.